Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers extend their new record for wins in a season. They beat the Padres again, win another series against the Padres, and it was on the backs of Miguel Vargas and the pitching staff. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to get into a couple questions from listeners and really dig into if Miguel Vargas has a chance for this postseason roster. So that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. We can be found wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. If you want to make it easy on yourself, subscribe in both of those places, and you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio, and I'm usually joined by a co-host, Jeff Snider. But as we've said throughout the last week or 2 weeks or so, we're preparing for the October run, and we're getting these days in while we can. So it'll be just me solo dolo tonight for the episode. We're going to talk about the Dodgers. But first, me and Jeff, we're both lifelong Dodger fans that have covered the team and still cover the team this season, along with this podcast in a few different ways. So we are watching the Dodgers a lot. We are talking about the Dodgers a lot. We are writing about the Dodgers a lot, or whatever else we're doing about the Dodgers. We're doing it a lot. So that's what I'm here to do today. And the Dodgers once again won a game. Their 108th win of the season. Their 14th win over the Padres this season. They went 14-5 against them. Didn't lose any series. And the series was, I don't know. It was weird. It was weird. The Dodgers, I wouldn't say the Dodgers played well other than their pitching. The Dodgers didn't play well defensively, didn't really hit too much offensively, but they ended up taking 2 out of 3 from the Padres. The Padres, who are still technically fighting to secure their playoff spot. So it's good to see that even when the Dodgers are not playing that well and the Padres are fighting for their playoff lives, that the Dodgers can still take 2 out of 3 from them. Last night's game was all about the pitching and a little bit of Miguel Vargas sprinkled in. The pitching after Brusdar Graterol gave up 2 runs in the first inning on some soft contact and a misplay by Trey Turner. The rest of the time, the Padres didn't score any more runs the rest of the game. Miguel Vargas ended up driving in 3 runs. Will Smith hit a home run, and the Dodgers went on to a 5-2 victory. We're going to talk about Miguel Vargas right now and just look at what his chances are for making the postseason roster. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, and realistically, this game isn't going to be a reason that the Dodgers take Miguel Vargas on an October roster, but it just shows a little bit, of what he can bring. And for the most part, that's giving you a chance at the plate every single time. He doesn't strike out a lot. In his 41 at bats on the season, he struck out 9 times. That's not that much. He puts the ball in play, he makes contact, and I believe with runners in scoring position, he's now hitting 400. If I'm not mistaken, let's see, runners scoring position. Yep, hitting 400 with the 500 slugging percentage. So when it comes down to it and it matters, he's put the ball in play for, it's a very small sample size, only 4 out of 10, 4 hits and 10 at bats, but that could be a lot worse. And when it came down to it yesterday, the Dodgers, what did they need? They needed contact, runner on third, less than 2 outs. They needed a fly ball. He hit that fly ball his first time up. Bases loaded, 2 outs later in the game. He had a very good at bat because, between the fastball and the off-speed pitch that I forget who was pitching at the time we're throwing, it would have been very easy for him to swing and flail at an off-speed pitch on the outside corner. But what he did was he took it right up the middle. He expanded his arms. He put it up the middle, gave the Dodgers 2 runs, put them ahead, and Dodgers never looked back after that. And it was one of those things with Vargas that we've heard about, is that his preparation at the plate and having a plan and knowing what he's going to do and at the very least, knowing what the pitcher might try to do to him. And in that situation with 2 strikes, he thought, hey, this guy might throw me an off-speed pitch off the plate or right off the plate. And that's exactly what he threw. And Vargas, wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say he was 100% on it, but he was ready for it and he adjusted during his swing and he got it right up the middle and he drove in those 2 runs. And when you think about this roster and you think about where Vargas can fit in when it comes to being there in October, and it's realistically between him and Hanser Alberto, they both hit from the right side. They both are, in theory, supposed to hit left-handed pitchers well. Hanser hasn't done that amazingly this year, but has done it in the past. Vargas has just been a good hitter overall in the minors, but you would imagine that a platoon's advantage would help him out. So when it comes down to it, Hanser and Vargas, it's a matter of ceiling and floor type of deal. With Hanser, you know exactly what you're going to get. He's going to give you a competitive at bat in terms of he's going to swing the bat. And on defense, he can play pretty much around the infield, which is probably the main reason that it's not just Miguel Vargas' spot already, is because Hanser has that defensive versatility. Whereas Vargas is a little bit more of a high ceiling. He can bring some power. He can, gives you those clutch hits. He can come through in the moment. He's not going to strike out a lot, or at least hasn't so far up to this point. Now, obviously, you're going to face better pitching in the postseason, but to this point, he hasn't really stricken out too much. He's been a contact guy. And that's beneficial sometimes. How many times could the Dodgers have benefited from contact last year in the postseason? Even if it was just a ground ball, fly ball, whatever the case was, they could have benefited a few times from that. And that's what he brings. Now, what he doesn't bring is too much on the defensive side. Yes, he can play left field. Yes, he can play third base. I would imagine in a pinch he could play short or second, but he's learning first base. He can play first base. So you got first, third, and outfield realistically. So kind of a right-handed version of well, not really. Gallo doesn't play third, but Gallo can play first and outfield. So what you're looking at is what are the Dodgers going to prioritize, and it's a matter also of what they're taking. Chris Taylor probably on the roster. That increases the versatility. You don't really need another infielder. He can play that infield spot and rove, be the rover if he's needed anywhere. Gavin Lux should be at second base or not Taylor. You have somebody, with Gallo and Bellinger and Taylor not really hitting, Vargas can be a guy that can at least give you, like I said, contact. Chris Taylor striking out a lot. Joey Gallo striking out a lot. Cody Bellinger is striking out a lot. That's not going to help. In October, you need contact to help you out. Now, what Bellinger and Taylor have, they have the postseason experience. They've been there before. They've been contributors to Dodgers wins before in October. And you're kind of banking on that. Realistically, that's what you're banking on between them. Gallo doesn't necessarily have that. But, if he does put the ball in play, it's more than likely going to be hit very hard and potentially over the wall. So, everyone has their benefits and not. And honestly, the more I think about it, if Hanser Alberto is not going to start a game, he's not a guy you put in late for a defense. Like he's not a defense first type of guy. He's just a guy that can play multiple positions. So the more and more I think about it, I'm intrigued by Miguel Vargas, and I would really like to see him play these last 6 games in order for the Dodgers to give him, a more fair evaluation and a more fair shot. And realistically, the fact that he hasn't, or that Dave Roberts is still saying he has a chance, means that they probably, maybe they don't really want Alberto to be on the roster. Maybe they want Vargas to go and take that spot and be that guy. And, he might just get 1 or 2 at-bats in a series or in an entire postseason. But if those 1 or 2 at-bats come in a situation where you need contact or you need a hit or something like that, and he comes through, then it all works out. So I think Vargas is going to start or play at least in every one of these last 6 games. And I think if he shows himself to be proper and strong with the bat, I think they're seriously going to consider him over Hanser Alberto on the October roster. So that's what I think. We have some questions from listeners, and also some of these questions are coincide with what happened in last night's game. So we're going to get into all that. But first, Let's talk about BetOnline because BetOnline is here and they're they are your number one source for football betting info this season. They got all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device to learn more. Check it out, check the website out, see what they got, and get into it because BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. So back and here to we like I said, we put out a call for questions the other day. We didn't end up doing the mailbag, but some of the questions in there kind of coincide with what happened last night. So I'm gonna do one from Blue Goon. Um, he says, I'm not as high as you guys are with the possible playoff rotation due to all the injuries. Is Tyler Anderson this good or will his lack of Ks hurt in the playoffs? Heaney as our fourth starting pitcher. I shudder at that thought. Can you guys bring some positivity to the rotation? And I'll just kind of combine all the pitching questions in one. One from at Chris J Hernandez. Where do we see Mays role in the Justin Mays role in the postseason? And then one from at third J underscore. How worried are you guys that the three for sure pitchers we have for the postseason are lefties? So I'll start with Tyler Anderson and kind of the concerns there and why somebody pitching as well as he is wasn't a guaranteed, didn't have a guaranteed spot in the playoff rotation up until recently. And it's because, yeah, he doesn't strike out a lot and he doesn't throw that hard. And when it comes to the postseason, when every pitch matters and everything matters, you feel more comfortable with the guy that either throws hard or throws a lot of swing and miss stuff. Because when it comes down to it, you're gonna get into trouble sometimes. That's just the reality of the situation. And it's a lot easier to get out of trouble when you're missing bats than when you're pitching to contact. One example I think of is Walker Buehler back in 2020 against the Braves, game 6 or 7, whichever one he started, and they load the bases right away at one point early in the game, and Walker Buehler gets out of it with some strikeouts. And let's just say, Tyler Anderson limits hard contact. That's the best thing he does. He limits hard contact. But as we saw and as we've seen before, soft contact gets you on base sometimes. And if you're in a situation where Tyler Anderson, where he gets beat by an infield single and then he gets beat by a bloop single, and then now you have two runners on, and in a situation where you need, to get outs, obviously outs are important, but you would prefer to get those outs without base runners advancing. And that's what he doesn't have. And I think that's the main concern. And regardless of how you feel about it, if you agree or disagree, that's the concern with a guy like Tyler Anderson. He doesn't have that shutdown stuff. He has stuff that limits hard contact, and he doesn't pitch to contact, but he's trying to get you out as efficiently as possible. And realistically, in October, like I said, every situation is magnified and everything is different. And we saw with Bruce Dark in yesterday's game where he gave up, two soft contact singles and then a soft contact grounder up the middle that ended up being, getting under Trey's glove. Chris Taylor was right there, probably would have made that out a little bit easier. But regardless, no hard hit balls that inning, and the Padres got 2 runs out of it. And that's the kind of stuff that we've seen happen in October and is a lot easier to handle if you're missing bats. So that's the concern with Tyler Anderson. Honestly, at this point, he deserves it. And I talked about this last week. He should be in the playoff. He should be in the playoff rotation, and he deserves it. And he's pitching well enough. And you got to hope that him pitching well enough the entire season is indicative of what he can do and indicative of what he's going to do in October, which is give you 5-6 innings at an efficient pace and keep you in the game. And that's all you can ask for from a guy like him, especially a guy starting game 3. Not everybody's going to have a ace in game 3. The Dodgers have had aces a 1-2-3 before and it didn't work out. So, it's a matter of getting outs, and Tyler Anderson gets outs. He limits hard contact, and that's all you can ask for. Doesn't give up too many home runs. So, yeah, there's concerns about Anderson, but I'm at this point, what else can you trust? And that's what we can trust is an entire season's worth of strong performances from him. When it comes to Dustin May, it's going to be a matter of if he's healthy, and at this point, if he is healthy, it looks like a relief role. And what the main thing they're gonna have to figure out is once he's back and throwing and healthy, is it gonna be a 1 inning relief role or or multi-inning relief role? And if it's a relief role, can he throw multiple days in a row? Can he throw 2 out of 3 days? Can he throw 2 out of 4 days? You kind of got to figure all that stuff out, which is why I don't, you know, at this point, if he doesn't pick up a ball and start throwing soon, I don't know if the Dodgers can count on him in October because you're gonna need guys that can throw 2 out of 2, back to back days, 2 out of 3 days, 3 out of 4 days, or give you 3, 4 innings, at a time. And realistically, I don't know what you can expect out of him because he wasn't pitching that well before. And if he does come back, you can't guarantee that he's gonna pitch well. And it's a little bit of an unknown at this point. So at right where it stands now, I think Dustin May might not be on the NLDS roster, and if he continues to progress and get better, he might be on the NLCS roster. So that's where I'm at with Dustin May right now. When it comes down to the left-handed side of things and those questions, it's concerning in the sense that Julio and Kershaw and Anderson aren't strikeout pitchers per se, and when you're gonna face teams, I think the Braves and I forget the other team, maybe the Phillies. It was the Braves and another team that are one of the best teams against left-handed pitching. And yeah, obviously they face probably some not great left-handers, and that maybe would have inflated those numbers. You'd have to go back and look at those numbers against left-handers that are like, above average pitchers. But it's concerning in the sense that they all throw somewhat similar velocity, which is not high velocity. Now, Julio's ramped it up to 95, 96 at some point, but it takes him a few innings to get there. Kershaw's sitting low 90s, Anderson's sitting low 90s, but they're the same, similar velocity, but not similar pitching styles. Kershaw's fastball, slider, occasional curve. Julio's got a 3 pitch mix that he uses pretty well and pretty evenly to the most point, depending on what he needs. And then Anderson's got the changeup and the fastball, and they're all throwing different types of things. And I don't think it matters too much. Good pitching is good pitching. These guys all have ERAs in the low twos or under 2.5. So these guys can throw and they can pitch and they can pitch well. Would I prefer a right-hander to be in that mix? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think it really matters if these guys do what they've been doing the entire season. And that's what it all comes down to is, can you do what you did the entire season? And, with the Dodgers, we, as Dodger fans, I think we have that PTSD of these guys may either pitchers not doing what they do in the regular season, hitters not doing what they do in the regular season. And, over 162 games, you can get to those nice looking numbers. But when it comes down to a 5-game series, a 7-game series, everything's magnified, everything's different. One bad game can cost you a series. And I think that's what, it's going to come down to for the pitching and especially for the hitting. But for the pitching specifically, I think these guys very rarely have a bad game. And that's the other part of it with Julio and Kershaw and Anderson. They're going at least 5 innings pretty much every time out the entire season. So that gives me a little bit more confidence boost in terms of what they can do. And then just on the fourth kind of pitching thing, last night we saw Brusdar Graterol was the opener. Andrew Heaney came in. He threw pretty much one time around the lineup, 3 innings or 4 innings, whatever it was. And then the Dodgers went to the bullpen, and the bullpen did it. Everyone did their job. Heaney did his job. He got the 6 strikeouts in I want to say 4 innings. Sorry, all these games kind of run together, and he did what he needed to do. He put up zeros. He limited. He was efficient. And could he have gone longer? Maybe, but the Dodgers are probably not going to want him to go too many times through a lineup, unless it's more like he can face the bottom of the lineup twice, but I don't think they want him to face the top of the lineup twice. Yeah, he ended up going 4 innings. He did give up 3 hits and a walk, but he did have 6 strikeouts. And then from there was Kimbrel, Ferguson, Martin, Vesia, Price. And are we going to see Price in October? I don't know. Are we going to see Kimbrel in October? I don't know. Although he did throw, a scoreless inning, did give up a hit. But Ferguson, Martin, Vesia, all throwing 2/3 of an innings, all contributing in different ways. And yeah, I think that's what a game 3 or 4 could look like. Tyler Anderson is going to be in the rotation, but it's a matter of, does he pitch game 3, game 4? How do you want to handle it? Do you trust your guys in the first 3 games to go enough into games to where you have enough bullpen for a game 4? Do you not care about that? There's a lot of things to have to think about and talk about, but that's one of those things. But I think what we saw last night could be a potential game 4 with an opener, Andrew Heaney, and then the rest of the bullpen finishing it out. Also, Tony Gonsolin's supposed to start on Monday. So it's a matter of it might be Tony Gonsolin for as much as he can go, and then Andrew Heaney for as much as he can go, and then the bullpen. So there's a few ways the Dodgers can go about it. So like I said, it's hard as a Dodger fan for October to be, like optimistic going into it. And you don't want to be too optimistic because, you might feel like you're in a jinx it or whatever the case is. And it's not the most conventional way, but the Dodgers have enough arms to shut down offenses. They have enough arms to pitch well. And we've seen that over the last few nights against the Padres, who are technically a potential playoff matchup. The Dodgers bullpen has been essentially shut them down for the most part. And, that's all you can ask for. And at this point, like I said, there's no reason for us to project potential failure on these guys. We got to trust that they're going to be good and that they're going to do what they've done the entire season. And that's all you can do. So that's where I'm at. And that's where I'm trying to be is confident and optimistic because the Dodgers do have have good arms. It's just a matter of how they deploy them. We're going to take another couple questions. But first, I want to just remind you to go subscribe to Locked On Dodgers on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. And if you have any friends, family, coworkers, anybody in your life that is a Dodger fan, tell them about us and maybe they'll like us too. Who knows? All right, let's finish up with some more questions from listeners. We got a question from Jerry at Jerry_J_Villa. He asks, how platoon oriented will the lineup be in the playoffs? I don't think it'll be very platoon oriented at all, considering 7 of the spots, 6.5 of the spots are cemented in stone, depending how you feel on Gavin Lux at this point. You're going to have Freddie at first, regardless. You're going to have Trey at short, regardless. You're going to have Justin Turner at third, regardless. You're going to have Will Smith behind the plate or DH, regardless, but more than likely behind the plate. You're going to have Max Muncy at DH or second base, regardless. You're going to have Mookie Betts in right field, regardless. Now it's a matter of, do you think this Gavin Lux dry spell over the last month or so is something that concerns you, or is it just a blip? I don't know. But, realistically, Gavin Lux to this point has done nothing short of cementing his spot as the everyday second baseman. So, yeah, I think the only 2 spots out there are center and left. And we've talked about this a lot. It's between Bellinger and Taylor and now Vargas and Gallo. And you throw Lux in that mix. You throw second, left, center, whatever the case is. Chris Taylor played to second base last night. Looked fine, looked good. He's a good infielder. So I don't think it's going to be very platoon oriented at all. I think if they go with Cody Bellinger in the starting lineup, he's going to be in the starting lineup regardless because of that defense and because of anything else. Now, what I do think could happen if they want to go platoon oriented is they could go Taylor at second, Vargas in left, Trace in right against lefties, or Trace in center against lefties. And then they could go Lux at second, Gallo in left, Bellinger in center against righties. That's about the most platoon you're going to get, those 3 spots. That's still something they might do, but I don't know. I think realistically at this point, Bellinger is going to be in center field regardless, and they'll only make that change if they're facing elimination and they need a good bat in there. While Trayce Thompson probably deserves to be in the starting lineup at some point in October, and I do think he will be, I don't know. It just seems like Bellinger is going to get that shot, and they're going to give him that chance. But short answer, I don't think it'll be very platoon oriented. Longer answer, there's very easily a way to platoon these guys if you really wanted to. All right, next question, staying in the Trace category from JD at JD Hernandez, the host of Locked On Ducks. So if you're a Ducks fan, go check him out. Locked On Ducks with JD Hernandez. What role do you see Trayce Thompson playing in this playoff run? Where do you see him in the batting order if he starts? Yeah, I think he's going to play left field if he does start. Unless they do sit Bellinger, then he'll play center field and he'll bat 7th or 8th in the lineup because your first six are going to be Mookie, Trey, Freddie, Smith, Turner, Muncy. Those are going to be your first six regardless. So then you put in Thompson, 7, 8, 9, realistically, probably 7 or 8. And that's where he's going to be. What role do I see him playing? I see him starting out, getting spots here in left field. I see him potentially growing into the everyday center fielder if Bellinger doesn't hit and the Dodge and Trace does hit. But make no mistake about it. Trace has had a really good year with the Dodgers and he's played very well, but his numbers overall still aren't amazing in terms of making contact. The biggest difference with him is when he does make contact, it's been hard contact and in the form of like doubles, clutch hits, and home runs. So he's not a savior, but I do think he deserves to get at least 1 or 2 starts in a series. And it might be that might be more matchup dependent, maybe not platoon dependent, but matchup dependent, depending on what kind of pitcher it is. But I believe Trace is going to get a couple starts a series, and I believe he's going to slide in there in 7, 8 spot. Um, Next question from at Saboren Sonido. He asked any lingering doubts regarding the bench. Pitching is a whole other discussion, which we already talked about, but it seems like the bench is largely set. The bench is set other than the Hanser and Vargas talk at this point, and I don't really have any doubts. This is a pretty strong bench. You're going to have either, these are the guys that might come off the bench in key situations. You're going to have, Bellinger, Taylor, Gallo, Vargas, Hanser, Lux, or Chris Taylor. And, do those guys, a lot of those guys strike out a lot? Yes, we've talked about that before, but have a lot of those guys come through for the Dodgers in the postseason before? Yes. Have some of those guys shown to be, pretty decent in clutch situations? Yes. So I think the bench is pretty good, pretty solid. And, depending on how you move guys around, you'll have different guys coming off the bench and needed in late time situations. But I don't really have any doubts. I do, like I mentioned earlier, I do think Vargas is really going to have a shot this last week to work himself into that bench or, into that roster. And let's see, those are all the questions that we have that are kind of about this season. We have some questions that are more future related and or maybe off season, some evergreen content. We'll get into those, but yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. The Dodgers finish up the season with 6 games against the Rockies at home. Yeah, I don't know what to. I expect them to try a lot of things. I expect them to pitch guys in different situations, and I expect them to get guys in a lot of back-to-back day situations, 2 out of 3 situations, 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5 situations. So I expect the starters to give you about 5, maybe 6 if they're really efficient. But I expect a lot of work from the bullpen over these next 6 games to figure out first of all, who's going to make the roster. Second of all, who can they trust in certain situations, and third of all, figuring out what they got, because as we know, this year there's a little bit less off days when you get deeper into it, and the Dodgers, while it worked for them in 2020, it benefited them because they were able to show off their depth. I do think it benefits them again this year because they're able to show off the depth. While the Dodgers might not have an Edwin Diaz, or Emmanuel Clase, or a top tier closer, I think 6 to 13 bullpen wise, or if you go 5 to 13, depending, if you take the 4 starters, I think they have one of the strongest and most, have the most depth in terms of bullpen, in terms of quality arms that they can put at you. I mean, Craig Kimbrell, regardless of what you think, still has pretty good stuff, and he was pitching in the 5th inning or 6th inning in last night's game. So I've already talked about how I don't know if Kimbrel will for sure make it onto the October roster, but that's going to depend, like I said, on Dustin May coming back, on Blake Trinan coming back, and Yency Almonte holding up, and Tony Gonsolin coming back and holding up. So there's a lot of question marks there. But yeah, just enjoy these last 6 games. There's like 3 bobbleheads in these last 6 games. There's Elton John. There's 4 bobbleheads. There's Elton John. There's 3. Elton John, Justin Turner, Mookie Betts. I think those are the last 3. So whatever. Go to Dodger Stadium, enjoy a game in the last homestand of the season, because then the stress of October will be coming, and we all know how that goes. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, aka Sully. He's got the number one daily league wide podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts simply by searching for Locked On or Locked On MLB. You can find us in those same places by searching for Locked On Dodgers. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram by searching for Locked On Dodgers. You can find Jeff on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts for any questions, comments, or concerns. You can send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or you can get a hold of us at 323-863-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Terry Smart Device Play Podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.